And for more on the growing sharing economy in China, I'm joined by Arun Sundararajan from New York University's Stern School of Business. Arun, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be joining.
Great. Arun, ride-sharing app Didi Kuaidi is dominating the ride-sharing market in China. It has about 80% of that market. How and why is it so dominant?
Well, I think it had an early mover advantage and it discounted things deeply early on. We're also looking at a market which has, I think, twice as many smartphone users as any other market in the world. And so, they got an early lead, they understand the local market, and so they established that sort of presence. I think they have 150 million users now, which is way more than what Uber and Lyft have around the world.
Well, Uber is trying to get in on that market. It has about an 11% share of China's car sharing market. It's raising $1 billion to claim more China territory. CEO Travis Kalanick has said that expanding in China is Uber's top global priority. He says he wants to put Uber in more than 60 Chinese cities. They're in about 11 so far. He wants to do this within a year. Arun, can Uber do this?
I think that they've demonstrated an ability to scale more rapidly than any other tech platform I've seen. They have a really well-developed organizational machine that allows them to replicate success in one city across multiple cities and to deal with the local regulatory challenges. So I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled it off, but I think in terms of facing competition, China is probably the toughest market for Uber around the world.
Well, you mentioned regulators. How are Chinese regulators responding both to Uber and to Didi Kuaidi?
I think it's been mixed. I don't see any significant difference between the Chinese response and the response in other countries. Taxi has always been a heavily regulated business. It was necessary 20 years ago because it made people feel safe. It made sure that they were charged the right prices. But with new platforms like Didi and Kuaidi and Uber and Lyft, some of those regulations are no longer necessary. And so we're in the middle of this period of transition where the regulations were great for the old model, but there are these new models that don't fit. And so you can expect sort of a constant tussle, a back and forth between the platforms and the governments.
Yeah, and that's probably going to apply perhaps to Airbnb as well. It's moving into China. It's partnered up with 2 Chinese venture capital companies. What do you make of Airbnb's move?
Well, China is one of the biggest travel and hospitality markets in the world. It's likely to be the biggest market for Airbnb in the world fairly soon. And so I think that it's a good move from Airbnb. I think that there are particular things about operating in China for a company like Airbnb that are unique. For example, you need to sort of store data about Chinese customers in servers in China. I think that partnering with venture capitalists who have expertise on the local market, I recall LinkedIn doing something similar, makes a lot of sense. I've been constantly impressed by Airbnb's ability to grow.
What do you think the challenges that Airbnb will face in China that are particular to the Chinese market?
Well, for one, they have a well-established competitor, which has a sort of a scale of operations that they don't face in any other country in the world. Tujia has 500,000 listings and is sort of a more established threat to them than any local competitor, say, in the United Kingdom or the United States. I think that hosting on Airbnb has a number of cultural nuances. There are different aspects to what it means to share your space for money, what it means to stay in someone else's space that vary quite widely across countries. And so I think an understanding of the local cultural nuances is critical to Airbnb's success in China. And so the deeper these partnerships are and the more they invest in sort of understanding the uniqueness of the local market, I think the more successful they'll be.
All right, those are some very good points you made there, Arun. We've got the accommodation, the home sharing, we've got the ride sharing merging into China. What do you think is the next frontier in the sharing economy that's really going to be big in China?
I think that different kinds of crowdfunding are certainly sort of growing very rapidly, where individuals are making sort of early stage investments into private companies, are lending money to other people, becoming bankers, becoming venture capitalists. I certainly expect China to be the world's biggest market for crowdfunding. I see a lot of potential as well in the provision of energy and the provision of healthcare of different kinds. I don't expect that these peer-to-peer energy and healthcare services will replace the incumbent industries anytime soon. But I think sort of local peer-to-peer grids and, for low-end healthcare,
Right.
like, you're clearly not going to go to a platform for heart surgery, but, if you cut your finger cooking and you need stitches, I mean, like, a peer-to-peer marketplace might be able to get you to the registered nurse that you want.
Interesting stuff. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Arun Sundararajan.